Hello, everyone. My name is Charmain Galindo. I am the Microsoft Product Manager for the West Indies for Nexus Caribbean or Nexus International. And I'm here today to do an interview with Sam French to discuss more on the space of Microsoft Azure, the security aspect, and how Azure can be a great asset to any businesses. So, therefore, we would like to have this conversation with him to explore more opportunities in our Caribbean space, and it will help us to grow as well as a company and as well as to grow your invested investments as well. Thank you, Sam, for joining us. Really appreciate your time here. Any words you would like to say before we begin?
No, thank you so much, Charmaine and the Nexus team for having me. As mentioned, I'm Sam French. I am the Azure Infrastructure, Applications, and
Just
Security Specialist for the Caribbean region with Microsoft.
Thank you so much for that. So let's start off with one of the topic areas that we would like to discuss.
Sure.
And again, this is more on the Microsoft Azure space. So one of the areas that we'll be discussing is why should customers and partners trust the Azure public cloud? Can we have Azure stay on island or in country? So one of these things would be what is Microsoft Azure? And what are some of the public feedback Microsoft received from this investment in Azure space?
Sure. So Microsoft Azure is our public cloud offering. So essentially, a public cloud is your information from your computers somewhere else. So we're looking to work with customers who are moving away from the traditional data center model where they're doing hardware refreshes and they're paying for real estate, cooling, power, security, internet, everything that comes with a traditional data center model. And we're looking to help customers on a cloud transformation journey and help move to things like IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS with virtual machines and storage and security solutions. One of the questions that you mentioned is, why should I trust the public cloud? And do we have any options to keep information in country or on island, depending on the customer?
Mhm.
Your information is very secure in the public cloud. Although it is quote unquote a public cloud, it is individualized and it is linked to your Active Directory information. So only your company and employees at your company have access to your confidential private information. When it comes to keeping those pieces of information and those workloads on island, we do have further offerings known as an Azure Stack device, which is a piece of hardware that allows for hybrid connectivity between your physical on-site data center and our Azure public cloud, where you can link the two together to keep some of that critical, mission critical information on-prem, near and dear to you. And then any kind of scalability or failover scenarios, we can tap into that Azure public cloud right away.
Okay, perfect. That's great. So, how does Microsoft Azure compare to other cloud solutions that we have out there? I
Sure.
know
So
this is some of the things that some customers would like to know.
yeah, so we've actually ranked in the top upper quadrants of the Gartner Magic Quadrants for this
Hmm.
year in leadership, ability to execute, and security. So when you compare us to other cloud solution providers, we have some of the best pricing available, especially when we take into consideration our Azure hybrid use benefits.
Right.
And then we also have vast scalability compared to other cloud players. We have 63 and counting
Hmm.
data center locations across the world. So that spans anywhere from the United States to Europe to South America to Asia, anywhere throughout the country and throughout the world, you name it, we have the capability to scale and to be redundant in more data centers than any other cloud solution provider.
Okay, great. That's great to hear. Cybersecurity attacks on the rise. What are some of the measures or initiative customers can proactively action to avoid being hacked?
Sure. So we have a vast security portfolio that we've added to Microsoft's arsenal of prevention against cybersecurity attacks. One of the largest ones is Defender for Cloud and our Azure Sentinel portfolios. Sentinel
Mhm.
looks for anomalies across your entire ecosystem, whether that be a user, whether that be hardware, a cell phone,
Mhm.
anything that is connected to your Active Directory. We're looking for signals, we're looking for anomalies, and we're able to alert you of any threats and then
Mhm.
automatically block and correct those threats.
Okay, perfect. So customers can be assured that, Microsoft has fully invested and has done their research to ensure that, their data is fully protected from, any hacks or ransomware that is out there.
Yes, we've
Yeah.
made multi-million dollar investments into our security portfolio, and on
Hmm.
average, we analyze 3.5 trillion signals per day across the
Wow.
entire solution portfolio. Whether that's an Xbox, an Azure data center, one of our edge devices, a satellite, we're always analyzing and always looking for threats and how to protect our customers.
Okay, that's great. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to jump into another area, another topic. So, what industries in the Caribbean do Microsoft help most often, and what do those industries use on Azure?
Sure.
So, sure, go ahead.
So we cover a lot of different industries. I personally cover two main segments, one that we call our multi-industry, and that can encompass anything from a food services provider to a telecommunications company to an automobile manufacturer. And then on the other side of the house, I also work with a lot of financial services industries customers, so banks,
Mhm.
reinsurance, investment companies, law firms. So we cover all kinds of stuff in the Caribbean.
Okay, great. And one of the questions I know we get is like, how is disaster recovery an important aspect for the Caribbean countries and why?
Sure. So disaster recovery is critical for a few different reasons. One could be for business continuity issues like
Hmm.
a malware attack where your services go down. How do you recover from that? How do you prevent against that from happening? How do you prevent that downtime? In the
Hmm.
Caribbean specifically, we are very unique here and we have an increased chance of natural disasters in the form of hurricanes. I personally went through Hurricane Ian a few weeks ago.
Wow.
My town was decimated and we were without power for 15 days. And I can only imagine what the businesses went through in my town. And
Right.
typically that happens in Caribbean islands, Caribbean countries, and being
Mhm.
able to keep your services up and running in the cloud and keep your customers supported and happy, even while you have large infrastructure outages, is something that Azure can do much better than an on prem solution.
Right, definitely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I'm sure there are a lot of customers who that is one of their biggest fears when it comes to being in the Caribbean with hurricanes on the rise and a lot more stronger. This is something that they can certainly leverage on. So I'm great
Yes.
that you mentioned that. Yeah. Can customers operate their organization seamlessly through the hybrid cloud?
Yes, of course.
Mhm.
We find that most customers operate in a hybrid cloud environment by default. It's very hard to come into a customer and have them move all of their infrastructure, all of their workloads into the public cloud immediately. And we're
Mhm.
not naive to that. We understand that's the way that customers are learning about the cloud and how they feel comfortable with the cloud, especially for their mission critical workloads that might depend a lot on latency or physical security. I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier with the on island in country scenario, we have something called an Azure Stack, which would allow
Right.
for that hybrid connectivity seamlessly through a device that we can provide you.
Mhm.
But if you were to operate a hybrid cloud without a stack, it's very easy as well. You can link your
Mhm.
existing data centers, your existing servers to your Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which
Right.
is located in the public cloud. And you can allow for seamless failover, backup, recovery, and you get the increased security portfolio that Azure offers.
Okay, that's great. That's great to hear. And can you elaborate more on the Azure hybrid benefits? Because it's something I know we have gotten some questions on, and it would be great to hear what's your take on that.
Sure. So the Azure
Hmm.
Hybrid Use Benefit is essentially a discount for licensing when it comes to virtual machines running in Azure.
Hmm.
So if you are a Microsoft customer and you have an existing contract with us or with a distributor like Nexus, you may already have Microsoft Windows licenses. And essentially, instead of double paying for a license that's bundled into a virtual machine price, you can indicate to Microsoft that you already have a Windows license and receive a huge discount on the licensing component of that virtual machine. We often
Hmm.
see savings is up to 50% just on the licensing alone.
Oh, that's great. So it's something that I know customers will be enjoy taking advantage of this.
Yes, it brings down the cost significantly.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So we're going to jump into another area as well, and it's like why is Azure better than a private data center when it comes to scalability? Would you like to just elaborate before we go into further questions?
Yeah, so I think
Hmm.
one of the ways that we can scale a little bit better than a private data center is being able to keep up with the growing nature of your business and your company. And we
Hmm.
are able to scale at a much faster rate than traditional hardware. Given
Hmm.
today's chip shortage, supply chain crises, global warming, pandemics, you name it, there's vast delays for hardware. So if you are
Hmm.
growing at a rapid rate and you need more server capacity to handle the increased workload, the beauty of
Hmm.
Microsoft Azure is you can go in and you can increase that capability in a matter of minutes instead of a matter of
Hmm.
months. And in some cases, with some of our workloads like virtual machine scale sets, that
Right.
scalability happens automatically with
Hmm.
thresholds that you set.
Okay. Okay, great. No, that's good to know. This information will be very useful, I'm sure, for a lot of businesses out there. And so, how can Microsoft Azure keep up with with the growing businesses that is out there?
Sure. So, an
Hmm.
example of scalability that we have in the cloud, as I mentioned,
Hmm.
are virtual machine scale sets.
Hmm.
A great example would be here in the US, we have something called Black Friday, which is a large shopping holiday that happens
Yes.
right after the public holiday of Thanksgiving. And everyone goes crazy and goes and gets their deals. And a lot of that has shifted to an online retail experience due to the pandemic in the last
Hmm.
few years. If
Right.
a company, for instance, is used to running 3 servers to handle their web traffic, and on Black Friday they have a fire sale and things are going for sale, and people want to procure more goods from that retailer, we have the
Hmm.
availability to scale out those resources in a matter of seconds based
Right.
off the traffic coming into that retailer. So we could expand your 3 virtual machines up to 1,000 virtual machines in a matter of
Hmm.
minutes, and you're only
Oh,
paying for what you use. So instead of spending a large capital expense on hardware that you might only use for
hmm.
one day out of the year, you pay for
Hmm.
what you use.
Okay, that's great. That is some great news. I'm sure that customers would love to hear that. So for sure. And so tell us more about like the Azure backup and storage. Can you, I know this is something again that we have gotten some questions on, and can you elaborate a little more on that area for us?
Sure. So the
Hmm.
beauty of Azure Backup and Storage is not only the scalability, but the
Hmm.
low cost and the redundancy. So we actually back up our storage up to 16 nines of uptime, so 99.916 times.
Right.
And essentially that works down to just mere minutes and seconds of outage time per year that's guaranteed by a money back SLA. So when you
Hmm.
upload your storage or your backup information, you can guarantee that it will be available when you need it. It will be redundant. If there's any
Hmm.
data center failures, hardware failures, all of your information will be secure, protected, redundant, and available
Yeah.
when you need it.
Okay, that's really some good news to hear as well. And so, coming off from that aspect, can you tell us a little more about what's the difference between then Azure Reserve instances and pay as you go? Because this is something that, again, customers have the option of utilizing these particular components. So, please, can you give us some more details on that?
Sure. So a
Mhm.
reserved instance is essentially your commitment to Microsoft to use a certain size of virtual machine for either a
Mhm.
1 year or a 3 year term. So a
Okay.
typical pay as you go virtual machine is you're going to pay a flat hourly rate. And depending on if you've used the hybrid use benefit, the license
Mhm.
will be bundled and added to the price. Or if you indicate you have hybrid use, you can remove the licensing cost from that hourly price. That
Okay.
rate will typically be slightly more expensive than a reservation because we as a firm, we as a data center company are unable to forecast what is in demand and what is not. By
Mhm.
you indicating as a customer to us, hey, I'm going to use this VM for the next 1 or 3 years, we are
Mhm.
able to forecast what our demand looks like. And for that, we offer you significant discounts. For our 3 year reservations, we typically see 72% savings. And when
Mhm.
you combine that with a reserved instance, we often see 80, 90% off list price when it comes to hourly rates on virtual machines.
Okay. So this is something that customers can certainly leverage on. They can utilize whether it's their reserve instances and as they pay as you go. And again, they can do that based on their scalability of their organizations. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So just coming on to our, last topic here, we want you to tell us more about the Azure security and compliance. This is a huge topic in most discussions with our customers, with our partners, and it's something that we always have to reassure the customers about. So um, we would like to know, when it comes to privacy in Azure, how can businesses be assured that their data is safeguarded from anyone outside of the organization?
Sure. So although we are a public cloud, Microsoft
Mhm.
Azure is dedicated just to you as a customer. So only people at your company can see and maintain and look into the information or workloads that you've decided to host in the public cloud. It is all secured by unique encryption keys. It is both encrypted in rest and in transit, and only the customer has visibility to those keys. Even Microsoft does not have visibility into those customer managed keys when it comes to storage and backups and all of your information. We use our Active Directory encryption to make sure that only authorized users are able to view your information. And we use something called RBAC, or
Mhm.
role-based access control, to identify which specific users in your organization are able to maintain, update, edit, delete, add information to your existing Azure environment.
Okay. So coming from that, so then how can customers then monitor, track, and control their data, especially when having this in the cloud? This is something that again we also get questions on, and how can Microsoft assure those customers?
Sure. So we do have some new monitoring tools like Azure Monitor, Azure Health,
Mm-hmm.
and Azure
Mm-hmm.
Log Analytics, where basically we give you best practices and alerting based off of
Mm-hmm.
what is happening in your specific Azure environment. If someone deletes a VM by accident, you will be
Mm-hmm.
notified. If someone creates a server that they weren't supposed to create, you will be notified. If there are any security breaches, our Azure Sentinel team will reach out to you, alert you of the situation, and if you so
Mm-hmm.
choose, can automatically block and correct that negative action that was taken on your Azure environment.
Okay, so it's very well protected, and customers have that assurance that their data is fully secured in
Yes.
the Azure space. Great, that is really something I believe that most of our customers will be glad to hear.
Yes.
And so, let's say, for example, in the how can public sector organizations or governments, especially, create their own? Can they create their own custom policies for Azure?
Yes. So we do have custom policies that you can create. There's two different ways
Hmm.
to do it. There's a
Hmm.
topic called Azure Blueprint, which actually lays out the foundations of how things are allowed to be deployed into your environment, so that users
Hmm.
and administrators must follow those exact protocols when creating any new workloads. Another
Hmm.
thing we have to offer is called Azure Policy, which can get really nitty gritty in the weeds specific about how things are allowed to be created, edited,
Hmm.
updated, maintained. A perfect example here is you can set guardrails on what your
Hmm.
administrators are allowed to deploy. A perfect
Hmm.
example is virtual machine SKU sizes. A SKU is essentially how many gigs of RAM, what kind of CPU, how many gigs of storage a virtual
Hmm.
machine will have. And if you don't want an employee going to spin up some monstrous VM to play a video game on, you can actually set up the guidelines and
Hmm.
say we can only deploy these kinds of virtual machines for these reasons, and you need these approvals to do so.
Okay, well, that's great. So coming on the heels of that, one of the challenges that we have faced is that, especially when it comes to public sector organizations or governments, is having their data in the cloud. They do have some compliance rules when it's applicable, or policies when it comes to government and public sector. So tell us more when it comes to that. Tell us more about the GDPR compliance, and how that will be applicable to not just public sectors, organizations, but all private ones as well.
Sure. So the beauty
Hmm.
of Azure is our scalability, our size, and our security. As I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, we have 63 and counting regions across the entire globe to support our infrastructure, resiliency, and redundancy. One of the things that we also are pride ourselves on are our 93 compliance offerings, which include GDPR, HIPAA,
Mhm.
SOC types 1, 2, 3, and all of those different compliance offerings, guaranteeing that your information is secure, protected, and only available for your customers' eyes. One of the things that we also like to touch on is that even though you might be a Caribbean based firm, you are able to
Mhm.
deploy resources in any data center that you so choose. So if your
Mhm.
business is based out of Jamaica or Bermuda and you choose to deploy your data center workloads into one of our UK or European data centers, you can do that
Mhm.
with the click of a button.
Okay, that's awesome. That's great news to hear. So again, we have come to the end of these Q&As with our Microsoft Azure Solutions Specialist Sam French. Um, Again, partners, customers, if you have any questions, if you would like to have a one-on-one with us, if you would like to get more information on, or maybe, as I said, have a call with us, you can reach out to us. My name is Charmain Galindo. My email address is charmain.galindo@nexusla.com. And again, we thank you very much for joining us and for sharing this time with us. Sam, again, thank you very much from us, from Nexus and the team. We thank you very much for joining us and helping us to clarify and deep dive a little further into the Azure space. So thank you very much again.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.